Hi, everyone, and welcome to Jagged Edge, the podcast where we talk about bold leaders navigating the sharp turns of education, innovation, and human transformation. I'm your host, Yogi Patel, and today's conversation hits right at the intersection of technology and humanity. We're talking about artificial intelligence, not the sci-fi version, but the real-life revolutionary already shaping our children's classrooms and your school policies, perhaps, and your role as a leader. In a world where AI is rewriting the rules of learning, leadership means keeping up and keeping our hands on the wheel. My guest today is Sam Shapiro, educator, futurist, and an author of an ebook, AI Revolution in Education, 10 Crucial Transitions. And this ebook is practical roadmap for navigating AI in schools. And today we're going to unpack how we lead through it and not just run from it. So Sam, welcome to Jagged Edge, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Yogi. I'm delighted to be here with you.
And Sam, you also have your own young children. What's your favorite memory you have from when you were a student yourself?
When I was a student, actually the moment the light turned on for me and I became really interested in education was in a 10th grade world history class at Santa Barbara Public High School. And I had a high school history teacher who actually came in as a long-term sub for some regular teacher who was out. And he was the first teacher I had that actually expressed a genuine interest in getting to know us as individuals. And this was the first teacher I'd had as an adolescent who, again, was deeply interested in getting to know us, who we were as individuals and learners. And I felt respected and valued. And that experience was so striking because it was such contrast to what I had been experiencing that it actually propelled me ultimately to want to get into education and be that kind of educator for children and teens.
And what's one book outside of your own deeply shared, that you find your views from in education?
Well, there have been so many. I'll just say the most recent book that's on my mind because we read it together as a whole entire school community of teachers and support assistants and administrators. And it's the classic book, Carol Dweck's Mindset and the Psychology of Success, is that really the emphasis, as you probably know, in Carol Dweck's work is to really inculcate in our children and our students this deeply held belief that it is through their effort that they will find success. It's not through an inborn sort of talent or being smart or gifted or artistic, but it's actually the effort. And that we can get better and better with effort. And then simultaneously, a deep understanding that mistakes and failure is actually required for learning. And that's also why I'm so enamored after a long career in traditional high school preparation or high school preparatory education to have been leading Marin Montessori school for the last decade. I'm so enamored with Montessori education because it is very aligned with the research findings from Carol Dweck about the benefit of emphasizing effort, the value of mistakes in learning, et cetera, in ensuring our children flourish as lifelong learners.
And one of the things that pop up for me is AI. Like, I don't remember when and how we learned about AI. Do you remember the first time you used an AI tool?
The first time I used generative AI was this year. After one of my board members, I remember, came to a board meeting, I believe the night ChatGPT was released, and he could not stop talking about it and showing it off. And I, at that point, was like, this is too much. I'm not interested. But I started experimenting with it only this year.
And I would love to talk with you a lot more today to help our audience sort of come to their own conclusions about AI and how, it will impact our students or themselves. So let's look at your why. What inspired you to write an AI revolution in education?
Thanks again. Thank you for engaging with me in this conversation and for reading the ebook. It really was, part of it is that, I'm leading a school in the Bay Area, which is the heart of technological innovation. Many of our parents are deep in the tech world and have a level of expertise that's pretty extreme, really, in terms of technology. And so I have become familiar with the zeitgeist of the tech world through Surrey school parents. And so I was hearing just a lot of conversation AI and how it's changing the face of our world. And so we actually launched an endowment for our school last year and decided to do a speaker series that we do every year as a fundraiser. But we decided to do a speaker series around the question of AI and its impact on the future world our children will inherit. And we were able to actually have Sam Altman come as our keynote speaker with a panel of a couple of people, a technologist named Tom Preston Warner, who was a parent at our school at the time, and a Harvard researcher named Zoe Hitzig, and all facilitated by a friend of mine who's the Dean of Religious and Spiritual Life at USC, with this question of what does the future look like for our children in light of the dawn of the AI revolution? And so my interest really, I think, sparked by being in the zeitgeist of the Bay Area and hearing so much about how it was changing everything. And I remember at that, after Sam Altman and the others spoke, and I was mingling with parents, I was talking to parents from a wide array of careers, from investment bankers to physicians, and they were all talking about how AI was becoming ubiquitous in their fields. It just became very apparent that this is something we cannot ignore. The other thing I'll share is I was invited last spring to a Silicon Valley talk by Yuval Harari, who wrote, as you know, I'm sure, Sapiens, but his recent book is Nexus. And he spoke about AI, and he talked about, and I read this in the ebook, he talked about the fact that the rate of change that AI is bringing to our world, the speed at which it is changing our lives and just advancing, is so beyond the speed of any technology before it. One stat shared is that the time to get to 100 million users of a consumer appliance, ChatGPT, it took 2 months. The internet took 4 years. TV took 13 years. And radio took 38 years. And you think about it, radio was a revolutionary technology. It took 38 years to get to 100 million users. ChatGPT, 2 months. So it just became more and more apparent that we are, very intentionally, I use the word revolution, at a place of revolution in our society and world, and it has impacts not just economically, but also spiritually. What does it mean to be human? And so I became fascinated by that and knew that my role as a school leader, I'm always wanting to be assured that we are on the cutting edge of staying very connected to the reality of the world that our children will enter as adults. Became imperative to investigate and write on it. I'll just close with this comment by saying one of the things that I've fallen in love with about many things around Montessori education is that Dr. Montessori herself was such a pragmatist. You know, she talks so much about we need to prepare our children for the world they will enter. And so this is obviously something we cannot put our heads in the sand about.
Indeed, I appreciate some of the conversations you've already had with your school parents. What are some of the conversations that are similar or more surprising as you lead these conversations? Because AI and ChatGPT, I mean, it's in every media and we're all talking about it at every party.
What have been the surprises?
So what are some of the surprising conversations that we're having? I remember in my conversations, I offer positive discipline at international schools, IB, and a variety of private and public schools. And one of the conversations is either, hey, I would like my child, to be kept away from AI at school, or whatever that might be. What are some of the conversations you're hearing?
Yeah, I think it's, what's great. I love, I taught philosophy in high school for a while, and I love rich conversations with many viewpoints and many possibilities. And I think those are the kinds of conversations we're having around AI. I talked to a doctor, this was a year ago at the Sam Altman event, where he talked about, and I don't want to misquote the correct statistic, but the capacity of AI to more accurately read mammograms than radiologists themselves was quite high, to catch signs of precancer that radiologists didn't. So here's something very positive potentially, right? You can feed in millions and millions of diagnostic studies and increase our capacities for correct medical diagnosis. So on the one hand, we talk about some of the positives. On the other hand, though, we look at some of the studies that I cite in my ebook about, for example, creativity. ChatGPT is used for creative pursuits. There becomes a homogenization effect where actually creativity becomes decreased. And so now we're looking at, wow, we really need to go back to make sure we're in analog creativity. We're throwing pots on the ceramics wheel. We're painting with real paint. We're learning the art of creativity, which can be taught. The other piece, of course, I think the biggest one in terms of our conversations, Yogi, is around the reality of what is called cognitive offloading. That is really what AI is doing for us. We're offloading our cognitive weight. And we're talking about 1-year-olds to 18-year-olds or to even 25-year-olds whose brains are still forming. What do they need to learn robustly? For children to grow up in an era where there is much less cognitive burden to get information, they're not going to get the weights. They literally need to develop robust cognitive capacities. And if we deprive our children and adolescents of struggle, we are actually depriving them of learning, even if they're able to hand us an essay that seems to show they know what the question, they know the answers to the questions we asked. So I'd say that's where the really juicy conversations are right now, Yogi.
Yes, and you also have in your book, you're talking about Jonathan Haidt's work, especially with handwriting. Can you speak a little bit more to that? Because that's what Montessori education is centered.
Yeah, I mean, and no surprise to Montessorians who talk about, the connection of the hand to the brain, which is all now supported by brain science research. That the recent studies have shown that actually when we handwrite, there's far more brain activity than if we type. Same thing with reading a real book versus reading on a screen. We're not talking about ourselves as adults. We're talking about very much humans forming brains and how we're depriving them of the richest cognitive activity when we give them a tablet as opposed to the pen and paper or the pencil and paper and the real books.
Yes. One of the things that we keep having a conversation about is our students, the concerns that we've always had, when we had that first cell phone that came out, and now we're talking about AI and the challenges. What are some of the current schools challenges that you might be struggling with the most right now when it comes to having students perform and learn while also using AI?
Yeah, thanks for that question. We're not really, there aren't many opportunities right now or interest really from our students in using AI. Fortunately, we've always been a very intentional school around technology. Students do have some access to laptops and desktops, but with a lot of limitations and very intentional use. We recognize that really what the world needs is not more passive consumers of tech. It's not hard to use tech. What we need are innovators. And so at times in our junior high and our history, we've actually had coding electives because really coding is about logic and language. Around the middle school age is a good time for those students who are interested in it to begin exploring coding if that's their interest. And so those are kind of what we talk about. That goes back to Dr. Montessori, who was not at all anti-technology. And yet there has been nothing, there was no technology in her time that was at the scale that digital technologies are in terms of being ubiquitous in all aspects of our life. So that brings us to today, where really our conversation now is around AI. And just last year, our junior high students began questioning whether they could use ChatGPT. And we had some even issues of academic integrity come up around use of generative AI when it wasn't allowed. So we're beginning this year actually a seminar discussion with our students about AI. We're bringing them into the conversation. And we're really approaching it from the place of, we want to start with hope. And I think it's essential that anyone who is educating children and adolescents is bringing hope. It's not nihilism. And so we are looking for ways to enlist our students. And really, we know our students want to work hard. They want to create themselves. There's a lot of cynicism about young people that they don't want to work hard. They just want the easy way out. I just don't think that's true. I think we are born, and this is Dr. Montessori's thesis, we are born naturally curious, and we want to learn and we want to grow. So we're this year engaging our students at our adolescent level around the question of really understanding what AI is and working together to develop sort of a sense of what is the ethics of AI. And how do we use this if we're going to use it ethically, but also very mindfully around not cognitively offloading hard work when that's what is necessary to make. And then in terms of starting even in upper elementary, beginning conversations around how do we evaluate sources as accurate? The thing that one of the things I'm most concerned about in society, and it's not an original thought, David Brooks, the columnist, coined the phrase an epistemological crisis. That our society, I'll speak for the U.S. I don't want to speak for the rest of the world, but our society is certainly in an epistemological crisis in that we no longer have a shared sense of what makes something true, factual, honest. And so there's huge risk we're facing now of even further loss of critical thinking skills and to analyze, to look for truth. And so in our upper elementary, we'll start really with work on teaching students how to evaluate credibility of sources. That will continue to our junior high level. And then our junior high faculty and our upper elementary faculty themselves will be participating in learning through a teacher development organization on understanding AI and its potential uses and also perils in their classroom.
Indeed, inviting children to participate in solving problems. So one of the bigger points you made, and I agree with totally, is when we make the rules sometimes happen to get broken because they weren't made by the students. So when you're including them, there is this huge buy-in and the input the students have. It's just out of the world. They think at an amazing level. And they have so many, answers to support us. So that just brought a smile to my face. You, in your ebook, you were speaking about the Dutch government's initiative. Let's talk a little bit about what they're doing. And in Europe, what is happening in terms of schools and AI.
That came through some reference that Rebecca Winthrop at the Brookings Institute spoke about when I heard her speak, that specifically the Dutch government, what they're doing is they're bringing the tech companies and the educators together to really plan the future together to ensure that it is student-centered. But I don't actually have a whole lot of details beyond that.
Yeah, so there is the NOLAI, No Lies Science Program. It's a national growth fund centered around it. And it's for European unions. They're bringing education, science, and businesses working together to come up with, instead of saying, we're leaning one way or the other, they're going to have conversations. And like what you just said with your students, just is going to be an informed decision and a plan that's going to be formed in the long run. And one of the things that stands out for me is not controlling one's outcome, because we don't know anything. Everything is happening so fast on a daily basis. It's a real world example to me is our children, they need to have critical thinking and solving skills, because to create those prompts on ChatGPT,
right,
or to, ask for research, that is always going to be human centered. So it's one of the most important skills. And I think you talk a little bit about that, as well as ethics and equity in your ebook, which is really beautiful. How is this ebook a little bit different than the one from 2023? Because there is, now this time around, you're sitting with your children and they talk about what is education, like the importance of education anyways, or school. And that brought you to write this ebook. What shifted in the past years?
Yeah, I think that when I wrote the ebook in the 2023 called Real Fear, Real Hope, Social Media, Mental Health, and Our Children, I spent the summer doing a deep dive into the research on the impact of digital technologies on youth, especially mental health. The devices, the social media, the programs, there's very little that's beneficial camps. We're going to be in the car camp. There's also a lot of potential good risk. And then the other side of that camp, which is really where I fall, is the tobacco side, which is there's no way to smoke more healthfully. Smoking is just bad. And I came to the opinion after looking at all the research that giving children access to internet-enabled smartphones is just bad and should be eliminated, as well as access to social media. AI is a very different conversation, in part because it is going to, and it already is, but it is absolutely going to make the world very different for our children in terms of the educational landscape they'll enter in college, as well as the career landscapes. I think it would be naive to assume that to assume that the careers will be not affected by AI. I think the vast majority of professions will be either impacted at an extreme level or at a moderate level, but there will be an impact. Learning will also change. By the time our children get to college, learning will look different. So I think I don't see it as a binary anymore. This is a reality. It is shaping reality. Will continue to shape reality. We have to prepare our children to navigate it in a way that supports their flourishing as learners, but also as adults. And so I think that's the real difference. And I also see that there are potentials for great benefits. The real worrisome piece is we know what it means to write an essay. I know what it means to write an essay on a typewriter with whiteout. And I know what it means to struggle with my own editing and struggle with my own math work. And many of our generations will not have that experience. So to understand what is deep, rich, authentic work, what is soulful creativity, what is soulful art, how are our children going to have that perspective if all they have is AI-generated content and ease? And so I think the battle cry for me now is twofold. How do we prepare our children to successfully navigate and utilize for benefits the tremendously powerful tools invented and being changed every day, while also ensuring they understand what it means to live a rich human life? What makes a good life? As I say in the ebook, I just reject what seems to be our mainstream notion that ease and consumption is the point of life. I don't think ease and consumption actually makes a great life. So much of it is about struggle and learning through struggle and relationships and awe. So anyways, that's really my battle cry, keeping the human experience at the center and what it means to lead a good life. And that will include learning the skills and the worldviews that will help our children successfully and effectively navigate the very opaque future they're walking into.
Yes. One point you made is students born now. This is their reality. So let's talk a little bit about ethics, access, and equity. Students that are learning AI could really be useful. You're speaking about elementary, middle school, high school, writing an essay, ChatGPT, or other tools. How could they use the tools that they have to enhance their learning?
Yeah, there's so many opportunities, really. I've just recorded my second podcast conversation with school leaders at a boarding school in Connecticut called Choate Rosemary Hall, because they've really been on the cutting edge of learning about AI and education and bringing it into their classrooms. And I love the work they're doing around, for example, and I was an English teacher for a long time and I taught writing, but they'll have students actually submit essays to generative AI for feedback. And they'll all look at the feedback together and critically analyze it. So or they'll have students have their thesis go through generative AI for feedback and actually learn from that feedback and redo their thesis. So there's one piece is just that opportunity to engage honestly, like let's just bring it in and let's see what it comes out, but then let's really critically analyze the feedback we're getting and make sure we're not just cognitively offloading, we're using it as a starting point for our own learning. I think the other piece that's really exciting, we have a teacher here who was doing some work with a student who was having some learning challenges, has some learning challenges, and he was feeling like he wasn't reaching her as effectively. And he went on to generative AI and he kind of explained the student's learning profile and explained what he's trying to teach her and said, what are some other lesson planning opportunities that I have that might offer lessons that give her more robust access to what I'm trying to teach her as a student with learning challenges. And generative AI gave back 5 really good lesson ideas for him to support a neurodivergent learner. There are opportunities like this that I think are really exciting. The other thing I'd say is, and I share this, is that I was first introduced to generative AI sorry about that. Being in a school, I was first introduced to generative AI through my older son, who was in college, and he talked about being in a pretty difficult science upper division class and not using generative AI to write his papers at all, but after lectures going back and saying, here's a concept that my professor just lectured on through the perspective of a senior in college in this major. Please explain this concept to me. So he used it as a really free tutor. And so I think about when you mentioned equity and access, there's great potential for equalizing access to learning. Individual tutors are very expensive. And so if I can go on to a free generative AI or a inexpensive subscription and get direct tutoring, is an incredible opportunity for equalizing the playing field. So when my son was in college, he told me about how he was using generative AI, and it was just sort of at the dawn of that time. And he was in a difficult science class as a junior. He would go to lectures and come out somewhat confused, and he would go to generative AI and say, from the perspective of a junior in college with this major, please explain this specific concept in science. And he got great tutoring for free. So I think about, Yogi, when we talk about access and equity, there's incredible potential for leveling the playing field in terms of access to academic support. Private tutors are very expensive. And if generative AI can offer free or low cost individualized learning and tutoring, that's a profound benefit for humanity.
Yes. So do you also have any concern that AI may widen the equity gap where, some students may not have access? Because you're right. Now tutoring has become very, very affordable.
Yeah, there's definitely concerns around just access to the technology itself, the updated versions of the technology. I think those are concerns. So those are definitely still there.
So what role does empathy, curiosity, or play still have in this new world?
I think that what's exciting to me as a school leader and a lifelong, or adult lifelong educator, is that this is really pushing us to grapple with the question, what is the point of school? And I'm very excited about being in schools because more and more what this is pushing us to understand is that they are for human-centered work. And one of the great risks of the increasingly sort of screen-based lives we are living is losing our emotional intelligence or not even developing emotional intelligence. We know empathy is important for just leading a rich life. We know there are fewer things more important to a good life, including even longevity, than human relationships. And that requires the capacity for empathy. So schools are fulfilling and will fulfill even more urgently that need to support children in communities of other children and adolescents and other adult teachers in developing empathy. That will actually make them much more effective in navigating the world as adults. I mean, I think we all know that it is not just about having technological understanding. If I can't go into a team of other coworkers and collaborate effectively to get a project done, I'm not going to be very effective in my career. And empathy is essential for that. So it's not a soft skill. It's really an essential skill. Curiosity, I'd love to drill down on that because I have a kind of a running hypothesis right now that actually this is the time to index kind of almost all the way or most of the way toward curiosity. And I'll give you an example of why I've been thinking about this. When I was last in college preparatory education, it was the time when every parent who was really focused on their children's economic success was pushing their high school child to become a computer science major, to learn coding. So many tech companies were continually hiring for computer coders, and pay was great, seemed like great stability. Now today, right, we see that generative AI is really threatening the career of coders, that it can code often much more effective than humans. So the question is, who are the coders that are going to actually navigate this world and continue to be successful? I would argue it's not the kids that were forced by their parents to become computer scientists. It was the kids that naturally were drawn to that field of study, that read about coding in their free time, that consume information about coding, and who want to talk about coding all the time. Those are the kids that are going to stay on top of their field as adults, and I think be most successful in navigating the evolving nature of whatever their field is. And I think for parents, the guidance here, the North Star is very clear that what we need to do is really listen and watch and observe what makes our child or our adolescent really come alive, and then nurture that for them. The benefit of that is that every time that we're saying yes to what they're really excited about, say, whether it's geckos or metalwork or taekwondo, when we're saying yes, when we're affirming that spark of passion for them and giving them access to what makes their curiosity just continue to be nourished, is that they're experiencing a virtuous cycle of, I'm interested in this, I pursue it, I learn, I feel fed, and I want to learn more, and I want to learn more. So many students that get to high school and even middle school are kind of turned off to learning by the time they get there. Those students who have robust curiosity still burning brightly, they're going to continue to thrive. And that, the last thing I'll say with that, and this is in the ebook as well, college admissions, as you can imagine, has been completely upended by AI. College essay, what is that now, right? So what they're looking for is evidence of sustained passion for anything, right? Again, it could be taekwondo, metalworking, geckos, whatever it is, sustained passion, engagement. Those are the students that colleges are looking for.
This very well explained, and that part really stood out for me in your ebook. Parents, even the college entrance essays and how we get into universities is changing. I wonder what that might even look like in 10 years. But following your heart, following your interest, the curiosity to learn, that develops many, many skills that are priceless and that allows us to write that essay rather than inviting ChatGPT to write it. Sam, many parents feel like they're playing catch up. How can they support their child's growth? And tech is moving rather fast right now.
What I really want to disavow parents of is this idea that if I'm not giving my kid the tech, I'm actually delaying them or I'm depriving them of important learning. They'll be left behind. I really want to disavow parents of that. And I think most of the experts that I read would absolutely agree with me on that. That the tech itself is not it's quite easy to use. And unfortunately, it's been designed, as we know now, to be highly addictive to our children and our adolescents. So there are far more risks of giving our young kids and even adolescents unfettered access to especially internet-enabled tech with this idea that we're somehow advantaging them or that they'll be left behind. They really won't. If we can focus on authentic, kinesthetic, hands-on learning where their body is connected to their learning, experiential learning. There's a lot of research that I cite in the book on when learning is actually brought to life in real experiences, solving real problems. There's far more engagement than just memorizing and repeating and forgetting. If we can emphasize real learning that's hands-on, that's tangible, that's experiential, that's solving real problems, that is going to make our students deeply robust as curious, capable problem solvers and skillful thinkers. I think also really the other piece for parents is we want to be careful about depriving our students, our children, of struggle. It is every parent's instinct to want to smooth the path for our child and adolescents. We all do it, but we really need to sit on our hands. This goes as young as preschool or primary parents that I've talked to. One dad I remember talking to said that when he's watching his 4-year-old daughter do a puzzle, he just wants to run in and do it for her. Or if our kid is struggling to tie a shoe, we just want to go in and do it for them. Part of it is because, it's love, and part of it is we're impatient and we want it done to our standards. But know that when we rush in and we stop that struggle, we have actually stopped a synaptic connection in that brain from happening. So healthy struggle and finding really in the world opportunities for them to use their bodies in their learning process, so physical materials. I think look for opportunities that, I'll suggest, and I've written about this as well. Both of our sons, who are now 20 and 23, did extensive backpacking wilderness adventure trips in their adolescence. My older son did a 30-day backpacking trip with an organization called Knowles in Alaska between his sophomore and junior high school year. Profound, absolutely impacted his life from then until now, and I'm sure for his whole life. In a few ways. One, it's going to be the longest time in his entire life that he's not, life isn't mediated through a screen. He got to experience his nervous system, his brain, having a screen detox and what it means to be really present and connected to life. He fell in love with nature. He got to work with peers of similar age and struggle. He had young 20, 30-something mentors guiding him. So opportunities that really bring life to the real experience of being alive to our children, that's what we want to index on, while fostering their curiosity, which makes them those passionate lifelong learners we want, and then finding what makes them come alive. So Howard Thurman, the civil rights leader, had that famous quote about, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do that, because the world needs people who've come alive. What makes your child come alive? Foster that passion these are going to be the students that are really flourishing in this rapidly changing world that we live in now.
Yes. And I love this habit of minds needed for the student's future.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I enjoyed reading your ebook. How could others get access to the ebook?
Well, Yogi, if you would like to link it in your show notes, that'd be really helpful. But we have a companion website called Grounded and Soaring. So it's groundedandsoaring.org. And it's a website we started about 3 years ago. It's not actually our school's website; it's an adjacent one. And our kind of our battle cry is that we're wanting to help parents raise healthy kids in a too often unhealthy world. So you'll find blog posts and videos and podcasts there to really support parents in your efforts to raise your kids in a healthy way in an often too unhealthy world. So that's Grounded and Soaring.
Wonderful. Yes, I looked at your Grounded and Soaring and saw that you already have had this conversation with others, and that other podcasts can be accessed at this website as well. I have to tell you, Sam, I had Montessori schools in San Diego, and my niece and nephew went through my school and then later entered your school.
Yeah, I remember them fondly.
And I remember my sister also at that time was very much about tech and not using tech because we were all speaking the same language. And I know that parents sometimes wondered, like, what was that going to be like? So I've had the pleasure of having a podcast with two separate podcasts with Naya Patel Daswani and Siddharth Patel Daswani, and they speak about what their life was like not having access to technology and what they learned and what they enjoy in life. And it's really powerful. Another podcast I want to plug is the one with Vikram. He speaks about, I was hearing a lot about the water and the waste and, every time you request a prompt and all of, so he actually takes everything that we hear and explains it in very important details, including how does ChatGPT or AIs work, and it's just powerful, and I'm just impressed.
So it's also about the environmental impact, but also just what is it? How does it work?
How does it work? What are the environmental impacts? What are the myths? What are the facts? And all of those amazing things. And it's Vikram Shekhar, and he clears it, and he's amazing. So please listen for that.
How old is Naya now?
Naya is now 18 and at university.
Wow, fantastic.
Living her independent life in New York.
Wow. I remember watching her play the tabla.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she still does. That was her outlet. And she went to Harker and just has done quite well. Very type A, just have to be best at everything type of person.
Yeah. Oh, that's so exciting. No, I'd love to listen. I'll definitely listen to them both.
And and Siddhartha is a debate champ. So he loves debates.
Good.
Working with AI and using technology to understand fire patterns. So
wow,
that brings me to the conversation we're having. These are two students who did not have technology, but they still are able to use AI. And I wanted to bring that up at the end of our conversation to say to those parents and teachers who are really concerned of being left out. Yeah. They're not. They still are able to flourish, and they're doing better as a result of having the experiences of volunteering, learning, and doing something different when they didn't have technology in their hand. So what does boredom sometimes look like?
Boredom can be very healthy if the outlet is not screens, if it's being something, whether it's contributing to your community, working on a physical project, working on your own writing. And there's so many cooking. There's so many opportunities that boredom can blossom for us. But again, I think we as parents have to sit on our hands and our temptation to just smooth everything out for our child and not let them be bored.
Absolutely. So, Sam, this conversation was incredible. Your ebook is a must read. And for those who are listening, groundedandsoaring.org is where you will find this information for anyone who wants to lead with heart and clarity through this revolution. Hopefully this podcast was helpful. And for listeners, check out the show notes with the links and upcoming trainings and membership and more. And as always, if you found this episode helpful, share it. Yes, I create these podcasts, Jagged Edge, for leaders and Now What for parents as a volunteer to support those on their way home with just a little tidbit to encourage, empower, and allow us to continue to do what we're doing so that our future generations can have the very best life. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yogi. I really appreciate the invitation. It was great to talk. Great to see you again. Please send my best to your beautiful family. Well,